Thank you. Can you hear me? Good, good, good. Well, I'm in a rush. They only gave me 45 minutes today, and in 45 minutes, I'm going to give you the entire history of metaphysics and the metaphysics of the internet age. Okay, you ready? Right, good. Okay, I brought a whiteboard. You see, I come from the music industry, and I hate PowerPoint presentations because PowerPoint presentations are like playback, right? You know, you put your slides together the night before, you walk up on the stage, you stand with your back to the audience, and you read everything you've written on your slides. Well, then somebody says something interesting, and you say, well, that's interesting, but I can't comment on that because it's not my next slide. You might as well have stayed at home. Record everything and put it on YouTube. So we're going to go more live, so I like interaction with you, your faces and whatever, or you laugh or cry or scream or whatever. I like to include that in the speech, so we sort of collaborate on this one. So what do I mean with metaphysics? Well, metaphysics is the overall grand narrative of any given society. And we need a grand story. And if we're not aware of it, we have it anyway. So it's not like you can avoid having a story about the society you live in. There will always be some kind of storytelling that will be valid for the society you live in. And it turns out that these different metaphysical systems are dependent on something we call paradigms, or we could just call it worldviews. And these paradigms that we base these systems on are based on the kind of technologies we use. So this has turned out to be the case over the last 10,000 years, or what we call the history of civilization. So I'm going to start by describing how this actually works. We have 4 different ways of communicating as human beings. And we've developed these 4 different ways of communicating at 4 different points in time in human history. So I'll go to the ladies in the audience first. You're in a bar in Vilnius, and it's Friday night, and there's a creature standing in the bar behaving like this. Is that an ape or a human being? I'm not talking biologically, I'm talking psychologically. Is that an ape or a human being? It's an ape. Yes, it's an ape. Now, finally, this creature manages to utter a few words. So the creature goes, do you have Tinder in your pocket, or do you want to go with me to Kaunas and fuck? Okay, I know that's very rude, but this turns out to be a man, and men are rude. They're very close to apes, okay? They're almost apes, but sociologically speaking, there's a slight little difference between an ape and a man, and the difference is called words, language. So the first paradigm we human beings created is spoken language. And we've been speaking to each other for, say, the past 150,000 years. So we developed spoken language about 150,000 years ago. It got more and more sophisticated, but finally sort of it got stuck. It didn't really develop any further because there's only so many words we can use or remember in our brains. In the spoken language paradigm, we lived in nomadic tribes. We had to walk all the time, constantly searching for food, because the only way to get food was to hunt and gather and pick a few berries now and then. Okay? That's all we could do. That's all we could do, so get food. Imagine you would have that sort of bread bun in the morning you get here at Novotel in Vilnius. Okay? That bread bun wasn't just served to you. You actually literally had to walk for, say, 30 kilometers to find little grains, to finally make that bread bun, to have that bread bun for breakfast. You'd be pretty exhausted by the time you had your breakfast. So there were never more than 3 million people on the entire planet as long as we were in the spoken language paradigm, because we constantly had to be on the move, but we were incredibly loyal to the tribe we belonged to. So our loyalty stayed within a group of about 150 to 200 people, exactly like Facebook forums today. The reason why Facebook forums should be about 200 members is because it reminds us of the original tribe, and we're socio-biologically programmed to be members of that tribe, because all our genes are from this period. Whatever happens after this paradigm has happened very quickly. So we can start by saying we have 2 components here in our philosophical picture. And one is the human, which is the constant, and the other one is technology, which is the variable. And I know you got pretty good schools in Lithuania, you're pretty highly educated. Actually, you're brilliant with absolutely everything in Lithuania except for self-confidence, which is essentially where I'm going to arrive today. You have no idea how hip you are. You're #1 in the world when it comes to broadband connections. For God's sake, the Wi-Fi is fast here. I just went over the street with Ulrika to have a cup of coffee, and I put in my credit card. I said, you know, when I go to Berlin, I can't use a credit card because the damn Germans insist that I should pay in cash. Germans are fucking Stone Age people. Lithuanians are cool. You just don't get it yet, right? You should be number one in everything. Okay, so technology is the variable and human beings are constants. What do we mean with this? What we mean with this is that over the last 10,000 years, we human beings have not changed at all. We give birth to the same type of children, the same type of brats that we gave birth to 8,000 years ago. They're pretty much the same. They haven't gone smarter, if you think that. Human beings are not smarter than we used to be. 8,000 years ago, we had to memorize everything to go out in the morning and get that bread bun. These days, you don't memorize anything any longer. And if you're 19 years old today, you're probably so stupid you think your brain is something in your pocket called a smartphone. Because you realize the smartphone is more, it's more smart than you are. Because your brain, you can't even trust it. Okay? So we haven't gone smarter as human beings. All change that has happened to us over the past 8,000 years is technological. If you look at your surroundings around you, everything that has changed over the last few thousand years is technological innovation. That means technological disruption always occurs and is incredibly important. Actually, each one of these four paradigms we're going to go through, it builds on a linguistic disruption, on an information technological disruption. This is absolutely key. And why I'm saying this is because we human beings find it very easy to adapt to technology. We love technology. You give somebody a gadget, they stick to it right away. We did not even have smartphones and laptops 30 years ago. These days, we stare at smartphones and laptops about 8 hours per day in Western Europe. That's the average. That includes old ladies in retirement homes and newborn babies. So that's the average of the population. And because you're cool Lithuanians and you're pretty young, it's more like 11 hours per day in your case. Soon you're going to have virtual reality goggles you're going to put on the top of your heads. Then it's going to be more like 13, 14, or 15 hours per day you're going to be online. You're going to be online all the time. You're going to have sex with robots. You're not going to see people. Even Tinder is going to become redundant. That's where we're heading. The only reason we don't realize how addicted we are to the internet is because everybody's addicted to the internet. And when everybody is addicted around you, you don't see you have an addiction problem. It's like, you go to the town park in say, well, not Vilnius, let's say Kaunas. Like, Kaunas is like only second rate, right? So you go to Kaunas and you go to the town park and you're sitting there with other people getting drunk. Most of them are Russian tourists. Like, you're sitting there getting drunk and you don't realize you're an alcoholic because everybody's drunk around you. You're having fun. Let's drink even more. You drink and drink and drink. You take crocodile in your arm or whatever, and you drink even more. So because you're a Russian, right? So you're sitting there getting drunk and drunk and drunk. And it's only when you leave the park to try to find some more liquor, and you go to a liquor store, and you see a really nice person of the opposite gender, and you try to flirt with that person. That person turns around and says, "You're fucking drunk. Get out of my way." And you realize you have an alcoholism problem. Maybe you should go and see a clinic. Okay, we don't realize this. We don't realize how addicted we are. When I did my first research on these things like 15 years ago, I discovered that broadband connections are now everywhere and people are getting addicted to the internet and they can't leave it. They can't leave their smartphones. Maybe I should look into what the side effects are of that. And then I realized that all over Scandinavia, they were building spas everywhere. You know what a spa is? You go to this place where you pay 500 euros per day for somebody to put hot Japanese rocks on your back. Would anybody seriously pay 500 euros for somebody to put Japanese hot rocks on the back? No. You might pay for sex 500 euros if it's really good, but not Japanese hot rocks. So why do people pay 500 euros per day for Japanese hot rocks on the back? Because there's something else they're paying for. They're paying somebody 500 euros per day to turn off their damn smartphone because they can't turn it off themselves. That's what addicts do. They pay other people to get rid of their addictions. And it's like I tried virtual reality in Stockholm the other week, and I put on these goggles, and I just realized I can't take this machine off. This machine is evil. This machine has been created by psychologists and professors of semiotics to make me an addict, so I can't take it off. And then they asked me, so are you going to invest in our company? And I said, I love investing in evil companies, but some Korean or Chinese person or even a Lithuanian person will probably beat the shit out of your company within 3 years and invent something even more evil. So I'm going to invest in addiction clinics because you can't move them. And now I've invested in addiction clinics all over Europe. 2 jobs to look forward to. Experience design cybersecurity, by the way, that's 3 jobs. Cybersecurity, experience design, and therapists. Therapy. Going to therapy now. Big booming business. Okay, so humans do not change, technology does change. That means that all change that has happened over the past 8,000 years was originally a technological innovation, which we human beings adapted to. This doesn't really tickle our egos, does it? Because we like to think that when we pick up a smartphone, we're in control. We're controlling this machine. We have ideas about ourselves, grandiose ideas of who we are. And this machine is going to make all our dreams come true. Imagine that, right? Is that how it works? No, it isn't. It works exactly the other way around. This machine was introduced into the world 30 years ago, and it's now taken over our life, and it rules us. You know exactly what I mean. When you wake up in the morning in Vilnius, and you turn on your Google Maps, and the Google Maps tells you, you really would like to do this now, wouldn't you? And I go, yeah, I'm a 56-year-old sleazy Swedish man in Vilnius, and you exactly nailed it what a 56-year-old sleazy man in Vilnius would like to do this morning, haven't you? Because you've got so much data now in this machine, because you know exactly what I want to do. And I go, yeah, I admit it, I want to do that, so I'll go off and do that. And while I'm off to do that thing, the smartphone tells me, and now you want to do this, don't you? And I go, yeah, my fuck, this machine knows my drives and desires better than I do. And then I go off and do that. And then the machine tells me, and now you want to do this, don't you? No wonder Google is the biggest and fastest growing company in human history. It's evil. It's gotten inside our brains. It knows exactly what we want to do because it controls the data flows of 7 billion people on the planet. So it knows exactly how to nail our preferences. And you think you control this machine? Are you mad? Well, a lot of girls are mad. A lot of girls go and get Instagram accounts. You know what Instagram is? Okay? Yeah, girls have Instagram. You love Instagram girls, right? You don't like guys, you like Instagram. You girls. So you get an Instagram account, you think that I'm so terribly talented and important, and I'm going to get Instagram and be discovered, and I'm going to have followers who find me interesting. You know what the problem is with Instagram? The problem is that 98% of the pictures uploaded to Instagram are never seen by anybody. They're never seen because all the girls on Instagram are busy uploading new pictures all the time that nobody sees. Because all these pictures are cats and babies drowning in dench. You know, and they're not very original. We've seen cats and babies by now on Instagram, so we're tired of it. But the girls keep uploading these pictures because they think that this is about them. It isn't. We have no idea what we're doing online. We just spend hours every day going online with our big fat egos, not realize that these machines are taking over our lives completely. So go back to the metaphysics. What happened after spoken language is that we introduced a new mad disruptive innovation called written language, and that happened about 5,000 years ago. What is the difference here? The difference is information storage. Information is power. In any given society, who controls the information has the power of that society. That's precisely what Google gives you Gmail for free, and Facebook gives your Facebook account for free, and why you get a Twitter account and your Instagram accounts for free, precisely because you're going to use them all the time, so they can squeeze the data out of you so they can get all the information about you. So they know more about you than you know about yourself. That's called power. That's why these companies are now more powerful than nation states. They're scary. Go and work for them if you can. You know, if you're going to deal with the devil, you might as well be on the devil's side. I do. So, anyway, where do you store the maximum amount of information in a language driven by spoken language, in a society driven by spoken language? Well, sorry? Libraries. No, there are no libraries. You're cheating. There's no written language yet. I said spoken language society. Clever, though. Yeah, you're a little ahead of things. Okay, so spoken language, the only place you can store information in a nomadic tribe is inside people's brains. So people memorize as much as they possibly can. Now, which brain contains the most information there? The brain of an old woman or man. Okay, so the old matriarch or patriarch have the most information, so they're incredibly valuable. If an old woman died in a nomadic tribe, it would be disaster. If a kid died, you didn't care. You could just have another kid. It's the exact opposite of Lithuanian 2017, which proves that values are relative over time. These days, if a kid dies, you get your own soap opera on television. If an old woman dies, oh, the old woman is finally gone. Bury her in Siberia somewhere and take her money, right? But back then, if an old woman died, it was a disaster for the entire tribe, because all the information she had accumulated during her lifetime would be gone with her. What changes then when you have written language is this. The thing I do if I'm smart and realize this is a paradigm shift. It's a new world. It's a new way of looking at the world because we can write things down. I would take my pen and my paper, and I would go to the old woman when she was dying, and I would just give her a little cake and a cup of coffee, and then she'd start babbling, because old women babble as soon as you give them cake and coffee. So I give her cake and coffee, and she starts talking about her life, and I write everything down. And then she dies. And the rest of the tribe go, oh my God, the old woman is dead. Because they actually seriously think that we do pity old women dying. We're just pitying the information we lose. So I'm saying, it's just an old woman's corpse. Throw it in the Baltic Sea and get rid of it. I've stored all the information on paper. Not only have I stored it outside of the old woman's damn brain, but I've actually stored it so we can build on her mistakes and not having to repeat them. So from now on, we can build on that information. We can, for the first time in human history, create civilizations. And what would be the storytelling then? Well, the first thing you would do if you had access to more information than the nomadic tribe is you would probably create a permanent settlement. You would start to nurture growing plants, and you'd have agriculture, and you'd tame and domesticate animals. That's exactly what happens. We get written language in places like Mesopotamia and Egypt and India. We immediately start building permanent settlements. That means the nomadic tribe settles down and create the first villages in history. And you have a series of villages along a river. The problem with having these villages along the river is that all the people in these villages are programmed to go and kill each other all the time. How do you solve that problem? You have to create a new story that unifies them. So you say that, okay, you probably take the shamans. The craziest guys in the tribe are always very useful when it's a paradigm shift. You know, the guys you don't really count for the rest of the time, you know, the ones that are out on the margin, taking tons of drugs and being silly. Suddenly they're very valuable, because they're actually the only people who are interested in people coming from other tribes, because they fuck anything that moves, the shamans. So you have the shamans sitting there in between the villages going, yeah, I'm from that village, you're from that village, and that's silly, let's take tons of drugs. And oh, you know what? The villages, they need to be like us. They need to be friends with people who are different from themselves. Yeah, because they kill each other all the time. Yeah, we don't kill each other because of shamans. You know what? Why don't we say that the original Ur-father of that tribe over there and the original Ur-father of that tribe over there are one and the same Ur-father of all of humanity, and we call him God. So they invented God. And because we can now write down things, we start to write Bibles and Qurans and Torahs. We start to write scriptures saying, oh, all of the different tribes and villages of the world are really unified under one God. And from here on, all storytelling starts with God. First there's God, then everything else comes after God, without question. So you get stories like, okay, first there was God. Okay, of course there was God first, because if we don't have God first, everything collapses. Okay, first you had God, then God was a little lonely. Okay, so God created Adam. And God and Adam started playing with each other, and then Adam got into his teens. And you know what boys are like when they come into the teens and they become men? They're not so loyal to their friends anymore because they think those girls over there are suddenly very attractive. So Adam would start saying to God, I want a girlfriend. And God goes, oh, you're so boring, you know. Okay, you'll have a girlfriend. I'll take a little bone from you and put some titties on it, and we got Eve. And then you have Adam and Eve, and they start playing with each other. And then Eve says, you know, after a while, she's like all girls. After a while, she goes down, well, you're really boring in bed because you come in 5 minutes, and I want to have sex for 8 hours because I've done a tantra course, and I'm a woman. You're boring. So Eve goes out in the Garden of Eden, and she walks around in the Garden of Eden, and she meets a snake. And suddenly even the snake have a story together. If you've seen a Japanese porn movie, you know that it anatomically works. It's kind of weird, I know, but it does work. So even the snake have a story together. And Adam is disappointed, and God is disappointed, and Eve is disappointed, everybody's disappointed, and it's all one big mess. And then Jesus Christ comes and saves us all. And that's it. That's human history. That was human history if you went to the church and it was 11 o'clock and a priest walked out there and he could read. And he'd written something down in a book. And that book was holy. And he would read exactly this story. And at the end of the day, he would basically point to whoever had power in that society, which would be the Pope in Rome. He said, well, the Pope in Rome has got the hotline to Jesus. If you want to talk to Jesus, you need to be nice to the Pope in Rome. You need to give me money. You need to be a good Catholic. It makes sense. I'm not opposed to Catholicism at all. In that paradigm, it worked wonderfully. So what happens then after that? Well, we have a next revolution, and that's printed language. And printed language starts in 1450 in Germany. And why is this a revolution on a par with the other two? Well, it's the efficiency of information distribution we're looking at here. I've got a book here. It's my latest book with Jan Söderqvist. My books have really funny, weird titles. Synthesis, Creating God in the Internet Age. You won't understand the title now, but you will do in 30 years' time. Don't worry about it. So if you know, I'm ahead of things, right? That's the whole point of being a philosopher. So if I wanted to create a book in 1449, this is before the printing press, what would I do if I wanted one more copy of this book? I would have to go to a monastery. And I would have to sit in line for hours with a queuing ticket, like waiting for coffee in Germany. You know, it takes forever. You just take a queuing ticket and sit and wait for a snobbish monk to finally come out after a few hours. And the monk would come out and say, yeah, I'm a handwriter. I write texts. I'm very exclusive. There are very few people in the world who know how to write a text. But I can read your book, and I can write another copy of your book, and it would cost you about 150,000 euros per book. That was the average cost of a book in 1449. Okay, the monk would suffer from what I call difficult girl in a bar on a Friday night syndrome. You know what I mean? You know, the girl who all the guys want to sleep with and all the girls hate because all the guys want to sleep with her, so she can go home and help herself. You know, enjoy that, yeah. Okay, some people have that luxury, yeah? So he would be like that. He would be like very snobbish because there were only 30,000 books in Europe in total in 1449. And if you owned a book, you were very, very powerful. If you had 4, you had a damn library. And it was time to have a VIP lounge and bodyguards because you would get laid if you had 4 books. Definitely. You'd be very powerful. So books were holy and sacred and rare. Along comes the printing press, and a guy called Gutenberg invents the printing press. You know what? Engineers always invent their own death. Engineers always invent machines to kill them. The same thing with Gutenberg. He thought that we would translate the Bible and all become good Christians. Well, we did translate the Bible, and we did mass-produce the Bible. Some have lost its value. These days, you find Bibles like toilet paper in your toilet rooms everywhere, and you don't really appreciate them any longer, and you actually don't read them either. Because, you know, only a few old ladies in Poland still read the Bible, right? Nobody else does any longer, not even in Lithuania. Admit it, right? So Gutenberg should never invented the printing press if you asked him. But he did. Suddenly was there. And you had monks and nuns all over Europe demonstrating, stop the printing press, it's killing our jobs. You recognize that? Yeah, I came from the music industry. I was the only music industry executive in Europe who joined the pirate party. Because, you know, if the business model is sinking, leave the ship. Okay? I'm perfectly happy to leave a model that doesn't work any longer. I just get off and do another thing. Okay? So, anyway, between 1450 and 1550, we fired a lot of monks and nuns that were not so cocky any longer. And by 1550, the average cost of producing a book in Europe was 30 cents. Now, if it costs 30 cents instead of 150,000 euros to produce one book, there are probably going to be slightly more books around. Okay? So that means we're going to have people living all over Europe who discovered they can go and buy a book and look important. So they go and buy books. And they sit in the new towns and cities of Europe, like Vilnius and Kaunas, and they sit and read these books. And they discover when they read these books that, well, maybe I shouldn't just read a book. Maybe I should even write a book. Because now when I know how to read, I can start writing. They're like girls who blog these days. Everybody's got a blog because they think that they're going to be famous now when they can do a blog on their own. So we had lots of people who thought they were writers all over Europe. So everybody started publishing their own little life stories in books. So people could read, they could write, and eventually they discovered we can not only make books, we can make a book every day and fill it with gossip, and we invented the newspaper. And the newspapers were sold in these towns and cities, and they were full of gossip and information about what was going on in the cities. And people felt that they were getting informed. And finally, this whole thing moves on to the capital of the world at that time, and we come to Paris in 1789 and the birth of modern society. What happened in Paris in 1789 was what? You've learned in Lithuanian schools. Of course there wasn't. It was a symptom of the revolution. Technology starts everything. The revolution happened here. What we have in Paris in 1789, no less important, but it's a symptom of the revolution. What happened in Paris before 1789 was that Paris was the capital of the world. It was the San Francisco of the times. And in Paris in the 1780s, it became the first city in the world where over half the population could read and write. They invented the tabloid, the newspaper. They invented the encyclopédie. They invented a book that contained all the knowledge of human history from A to Z in one book. And suddenly when you come to 1789, we have people sitting in the city of Paris reading a book containing all the knowledge of the entire human history. And next to them is a newspaper, and the newspaper says, next to Paris, there's this dreadful place called Versailles. And Versailles is full of 10,000 stupid little faggots or whatever who take your tax money and they cannot read and write and they're incredibly stupid and they put lots of powder on their faces and they do she and sha all the time. You should go and kill them. They're aristocrats, they're kings and they're priests. Why don't you take over? Well, I'm really smart and clever and I can read books and I've got a damn library here in Paris and I'm going to build factories and I'm going to take over the world. Yeah, I will go and kill them. So people in Paris went to Versailles with the guillotines. And the funny thing is when little Marie Antoinette, who was obviously on the cover of every tabloid, she was the Lindsay Lohan of her time. Okay, she was a girl, bad idea. Young, bad idea. Beautiful, bad idea. Foreigner, really bad idea. And she ate cakes instead of baguettes for breakfast. Really bad idea. So when Marie Antoinette comes out of the guillotine, her head is chopped off. When her head falls off, she still has no idea what a tabloid is. That's typical for paradigm shifts. That's why Germans don't get it right now. Because Germans invented the printing press. Everything that happened the last 400 years was about Germany and Britain and France. They're the three most boring countries in the world right now. Guess why? Because they're fat and lazy. Because they were successful in the past. So, there we go. Paris 1789, symptom of the revolution, and the world changes forever. And why does it change? Well, there's a dialectical relationship between humans and technology. Dialectical means that one thing affects the other, which responds and then responds back. The first thing is you have a technological disruption. It should happen somewhere where you don't pay attention to it and where you don't really think it's important. Perfect with the printing press in 1450 was completely underrated. Oh, it's just somebody printing some Bibles. Well, that's not that important. Yeah, okay. It's like Germans today. Well, we pay in cash. We don't even have credit cards. Credit cards can't be that important. Well, the thing with you Germans is that you're going to lose it completely and be really poor and sad and pathetic because you're not interested in the future to begin with. Okay? So you have technology first. Then you need an idea, and the same thing with an idea. It should just pop up somewhere like God did with the shamans. Nobody thought the shamans would come up with a brilliant idea. Well, actually, the shamans built the ritual places between the villages that eventually became the first cities. Because obviously the first people to follow the shamans to the ritual places where you connected with storytelling the different villages would be the traders. And as soon as you start trading, you create economic wealth. So villages didn't grow into cities. Cities were built in between villages to connect the villages. Same thing here. So you need an idea. You need to kill God. You got to get rid of God. You got to have a new religion here. To then make Paris possible, well, that's Paris is not the thing, it's a chaos. And finally, after the chaos, we have the domestication of the new forces. We have the understanding of the society you're moving into, when finally civilization takes hold. So, chaos is Paris in 1789, chaos is the world today. We have 7 billion people connected to each other on the internet. Actually, if you were an alien and you arrived on this planet today and you didn't know the history of the planet, you'd probably describe planet Earth as one huge computer which knows what it's doing, and to it there are 7 billion very confused bodies that are tied to that machine. We call it the global empire, by the way, in a book we wrote 13 years ago. So that's it. The idea has been explored for a while now. But that's essentially what the world is. It is one huge computer and 7 billion confused bodies, right? So there has to be a new idea here. And that new idea comes between 1450 and 1789. And that new idea was actually formulated in 1637 by a little French philosopher called René Descartes. And it's the world's most famous tweet. I think, therefore I am. It's brilliant. Descartes knew the Catholic Church would probably kill him if he said that God was dead, because they wanted to get rid of God. So he said, no, God is asleep. Girls, you know exactly what I mean. You know, if you want to get rid of a guy, he's kind of nasty, just put a sleeping pill in his beer and he's gone, you know? You put him to sleep. If you want to get rid of somebody, you don't want to kill them, you put him to sleep. So you just need to put God to sleep. So Descartes said, well, God is not really relevant. We put him to sleep. He's created everything perfect and everything's done. But what's interesting now is me. You're going to Descartes. I'm the interesting thing. And, well, I'm not sure you exist, René Descartes, but I'm sure that Alexander Bard exists. I can borrow your model and say that I'm sure Alexander Bard exists, and René Descartes might exist. So he created something we call the individualism. And he had a friend who he wrote letters to called Newton, who lived in London, and Newton said, that's a brilliant idea. If we put God to sleep, that means that nature is perfect as it is and won't change. That means we can register how an apple falls from a tree. It will fall exactly the same way every time. That means that I can create natural science based on atomism, which is the equivalent of the individual in nature. And eventually we created nationalism as well for the collective of people. So we create the nation state and the atom in physics, and we create individualism out of the same idea, which is Descartes' groundbreaking idea, the kick-starting of the French Enlightenment in 1637. I think, therefore I am. I'll teach you one thing about metaphysics. Always build it on something that people cannot check. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be something people want to believe. God, brilliant idea. An old man with a big penis stuck on a cloud watching us all the time because nothing better to do. He's the guy who watches all the Instagram pictures when we don't have time to watch them. Brilliant idea. I mean, this isn't antiquity. Imagine having a rocket in old Rome or Greece to go above the clouds. It would be impossible. It wasn't until Gagarin from dear old Russia in 1958 finally took a rocket above the cloud that somebody went above the clouds in human history. And the first thing Gagarin reported down to Earth was, I'm above the clouds now and there's no God here. You know what the Catholic Church responded? He's further away. Because without God, they're gone, right? So, same thing here. Descartes asked the question in 1637. This individual, this center of everything, because everything's about origin and center. Origin and center. Worldview starts with origin and center. So, this individual, where is he located? Oh, he's located in a gland inside the brain. Brilliant. This is 1600s France, you know. Imagine you have somebody in front of you and slash open their neck and you take the muscles and the blood vessels and everything away to finally get to that gland. By the time you get to the gland, the guy's dead and the individual's gone. So you can't check that. So if you want to believe in the individual, you believe in the individual. And people have. It's been the dominant religion in the Western world for the past 400 years. And it's exactly what puts everything in motion in Paris in 1789, except people are still not aware of it. All right, so we have the idea, that's the individualism here, and then we have the chaos. Now the question is, who sorts out the chaos? Well, normally in any given society, the best position you can be in is to be the son or the daughter, possibly, of the guy who's in charge. That means if you were in Paris in 1788, you'd still prefer to be the son of an aristocrat or the legitimate son of a priest or the son of a king, right? But in 1789, that would be very unfortunate because exactly paradigm shifts, you want to be as far away as possible from the old power structure. That's precisely why when I invest in tech startups today, I do not invest in tech startups by Germans. I invest in tech startups in Lithuania or in Kenya because they have the best Wi-Fi in the world and they're hungry. They just don't have the self-confidence yet, but that's good because it's always somewhere in the margin that new things are happening first. So it's called Skype in Estonia, there you go. Or it's called WhatsApp in Ukraine, or it's called Telegram in Russia. None of these companies are American, they're invented here. But people are hungry. So, if I usually invest in a Lithuanian lesbian today, preferably somebody far removed from a German old industrial son as you could possibly get, then where do you find a Lithuanian lesbian in Paris in 1789? You don't. But you find a Corsican dwarf. That's good enough. He's called Napoleon. So what Napoleon did was that he was sitting in his little apartment in Paris in 1789. He saw the revolution outside his window, and he thought, okay, normally Corsican dwarf means nothing. I mean, if you've been to France, being Corsican is terribly uncool, You're like the least cool thing in the world. You don't get a lot of Tinder dates if you're Corsican, right? You're really the nerd, right? And if you're a dwarf, you might have a role in a porn movie sometimes, but otherwise you don't get laid. You have a problem, right? So he's a Corsican dwarf, and he's got a problem. He's like, normally it's terrible to be a Corsican dwarf, but actually right now it could be beneficial because there's a paradigm shift going on. So he joins the French army, realizing they're going to chop off the heads of all the officers in the French army because they all have these noble aristocratic last names. That's exactly what happens. In a few years' time, Napoleon becomes a general. Because nobody kills the Corsican dwarf. They underrate him completely. Like Lithuanian tech companies today. They don't get how big they're going to be. So Napoleon takes over France in the year 1800. He says, aren't you tired of slaughtering everybody in the streets of Paris? Soon you'll all be dead. But if you let the Corsican dwarf run the show, I'll stop the killings. And they say, yes, please do. And he takes over France, and he becomes the dictator of France. And of course, he does what really innovative guys always do. He goes to the army. And he then creates an army that looks like this. You take an individual at the top, a Corsican dwarf. He runs the show. Underneath this super individual, you have other individuals, individually responsible for what they do. They're called officers. Underneath the officers here, you have the sub-officers who are responsible to report to the officers. And further down the line, at the very bottom, you have what we call the cannon fodder. Your first reaction is, don't all armies look like this? No, because in Napoleon's army in 1806, even the cannon fodder could read and write. Napoleon understood the capacity of reading and writing. He gambled on this one thing. If somebody can read and write, they're going to be 100 times more efficient at killing people than if they can't. They're going to be better murderers. And he was right. Napoleon's army shocked the world. They wiped out everything. They beat the Prussians, they beat the Italians, they beat the Spaniards, they beat everybody. They beat the Danes, they beat everybody. They were everywhere. And Europe was shocked. Until a year later, you had a little guy in Super Alexander Bard called Hegel, a German philosopher. And in the year 1807, he published a groundbreaking book called The Phenomenology of Spirit. And Hegel essentially said this: I'm so terribly sad for you Germans that all your daughters have been raped and all your sons have been killed and the entire country has been slaughtered and is wasted and gone. And this was really the apocalypse. But still, you're pussies. Because Napoleon is the shit. And we're Germans. And there's one thing we're good at, that's copying. And all we need to do is to copy Napoleon's model. So clever little Hegel found out. His best friend was called Humboldt, and he was the new Minister of Education in Germany. And he invented the first Hochschule system in the world, which essentially said that teachers should be like Napoleon. They should just stand there, and they should dictate, and then everybody should learn how to read so they can write down what the teacher says. That's called school. Then we have prisons. You have a prison general. He decides that all these prisoners in there, they're going to slave around and do exactly what he wants them to do, and they're going to follow his orders because they can read. You invent the factory. You got the factory owner, and the factory owner is another old man, another patriarch, another man over 50 years old, and he gives orders, and all the factory workers are doing exactly what he says they should do because they can read. Factories, corporations, nation-state bureaucracies, prisons, police, hospitals. Dr. Napoleon walks around in the hospital, and he knows who's sick and who isn't. And he tells you if you can have a prescription or not. You cannot decide for yourself if you're sick or not. He decides that because he's Dr. Napoleon, and we'll build hospitals for Dr. Napoleon so he can get laid with all the nurses. We've had all these men all over society for the past 200 years, and they believe they're individuals. What happened? Well, radio and television, confusingly, only enhanced this. You have to understand that paradigm shifts happen very, very quickly because they're direct results of technological disruption. That means that the priest telling the story about God, Adam, and Eve was more true than ever in the church in 1449. That means that the Napoleonic way of organizing things was more true than ever when we come to 1989. Then the internet came along. And I told you the really big disruptions in history always start in the margins and they're always underrated. Oh, but it's just computers being connected to each other. Oh, these computers got the World Wide Web now. Well, you can look at funny pictures. The reaction to the World Wide Web was essentially, well, we're going to use the World Wide Web to market the shit we produce in our factories. Well, that's not what happened. The internet's disrupting absolutely everything. It's been completely underrated. Look at the Napoleonic structure. What the internet does is that it starts connecting the cannon fodder directly with each other. So they start babbling directly with each other. And they get less and less time to listen to Napoleon. They might gossip about Napoleon, whatever, but they might think that Trump versus Clinton still is important, although it isn't. We don't really care. It's a show, it's a TV show. We wrote in our book, The Netocrats, 17 years ago, that soon America will elect a game show host for president, because when it doesn't matter who's the president anyway, you might as well take the most celebrity, and select a celebrity. And that's what they did. Makes sense, because it's no longer important. Power has moved elsewhere. So people are talking more and more to each other, and now they spend up to 8 or 9 hours a day going online. Napoleon is dead. That model is over. The last little remnants of a Napoleon is a man who thinks the internet is for him, and he writes a newsletter every week. You know what I mean? You get this newsletter from a man, and he tells you everything he's done over the last 7 days, and how important it is, and how he's mansplaining everything he does. And at the end, you're supposed to buy his record or his book or whatever. And what do you do with this newsletter? You throw it in the damn spam box because you hate it. It's called advertising. Advertising is dead. We throw it away. We hate it. Because it's not intelligent. It's not communicative. And we're spoiled now. We want everything to be intelligent and communicative. Otherwise, we don't listen to it. So we all live here. That means the individual is also dead. And the question is, what replaces it? Because the internet is the fourth revolution. It kills all the other three. Everything goes online. Everything becomes interactive. You can no longer present any message without expecting another message in return. That's called communication, folks. So to be communicative, to be socially intelligent, to be curious about other people who are different from you, suddenly becomes the biggest asset of all. It doesn't cost you anything to go online, especially not in Lithuania. Wi-Fi is virtually free everywhere. Gmail accounts don't cost anything. Facebook accounts don't cost anything. Twitter don't cost anything. So my straightforward question to you guys, you probably live in the most broadband hip country in the world right now. You have more Wi-Fi, stronger Wi-Fi, more reliable Wi-Fi than anywhere else on the planet. You're a member of the European Union. You got the euro as a currency. That you have no excuses not to be successful. But if social intelligence is the new currency, then I must ask you this straightforward question. If San Francisco is the Paris of today, how many of you guys in this room have a friend who has a house in downtown San Francisco? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the problem. Look at this. This is the world right now. Do we see any patterns inside of this? Are there any patterns occurring? Well, there's an enormous difference between somebody who has 400,000 Twitter followers and somebody who has 11 Twitter followers. There's an enormous difference in power and influence between somebody who has 5,000 Facebook friends and somebody who's 21. There's also an enormous difference between those who know the right people and those who know the wrong people only. This is called the sociogram. It's Facebook's biggest asset. Facebook are essentially making a map of all 7 billion people on the planet and know who knows whom. Because that is now the currency. We called it the network pyramid in our book, The Netocrats, 17 years ago, because this is a principle that comes out of the logic of the internet. There's going to be too much chaos. And when there's too much chaos in history, we appreciate order. And we pay for order with anything we have. So who gives us order? The people who give us order in this chaos are, of course, the people who have the most friends. So we go to them, if we can. So what the internet becomes is that if it's all on a level, we all have free Gmail accounts, and we all have our free Facebook accounts, etc., etc. So the access is free for everybody. Well, if there's 7 billion people joining the same network, eventually the key people in the network, the ones that are the coolest and have the most social intelligence and are the most socially savvy, are going to start connecting directly with each other. Because they don't want the noise of all these trolls out there babbling for attention all the time. They don't want the Instagram feeds with the pictures of cats and babies, because they've seen that, they're tired of it. They don't want the nonsense on MySpace of all these untalented people who throw music at you that you don't want to hear, because you get much better music on Spotify. Because people don't understand what they're doing, so they're all screaming for attention in all the wrong ways. But the intelligent people in here, They start to sense where they should go, they use their intuition, and they create a smaller network of the key people. And they will then put a firewall around that network, and that principle is called the principle of exploitation. You cannot have it. You can have too many friends because your friends are not really friends. They're just irritations. You have to concentrate on the people who give you value in their communication. That means you turn off advertising. That's the first thing you throw in the spam box. Then you turn off all those people who want to add you on Facebook who are not really interesting. Because they want to get access to your knowledge and your know-how, but they don't give you anything in return. Then why the fuck should you add them? They're an irritation. So you remove them. You don't have time for them. So finally you learn that you get a smaller network that exploits its value. And you might have a few Lithuanians in here that are connected with a few other cool people in, say, America or Scandinavia or the UK or wherever else things are happening. But eventually these guys will find this network being too big too, because the pressure from underneath is too strong for this network to grow. So they will look for a smaller, even smaller network with a stronger firewall around it, and we have the virtual equivalent of gated communities. This is where the internet is heading now. This is what Facebook are evilishly trading right now. They're tracking this development. My point is this. This is your only problem in Lithuania today. I predicted a couple of years ago when you were the first country in the world to reach over 40% fiber optic access in households. The first country in the world. You even beat South Korea to it. South Korea is number 2, then Latvia, then Estonia, then Sweden, then Finland, then Denmark, then Israel, then Norway. Israel, Korea, the 3 Baltic countries and the 4 Nordic countries are at the forefront in the world today when it comes to building strong, reliable broadband and Wi-Fi. That's genius. The rest is culture. You guys don't speak Russian any longer because you don't want to be uncool Russians. You speak English. A large part of your population have lived as waiters in London and Germany the past 10 years. Well, it's time for them to come home and start tech startup companies here. When somebody can finally value their skills because they don't value them in London. You should be proud of yourselves. Because if you do get self-confidence and understand how cool you are, then people will want to be friends with you in the rest of the world. It's not you should beg people in San Francisco to know you. It's people in San Francisco who should go to the Baltic countries and look for ambassadors in Vilnius. That's how you cruise in a bar on a Friday night. You don't get laid if you walk in with bad self-confidence. I'm just a Lithuanian, I don't get anything. It's just like, no. You raise up and you go, I'm a damn Lithuanian. Vilnius is the next thing to happen. Forget about Berlin's nightlife. Forget about Stockholm's tech companies. We're going to do it here. And Skype is just the beginning of the whole thing. That just proves it can be done in the Baltic countries. Now we're going to do it big time. I'll tell you, nothing prevents you from doing that. But in that case, I need 150 hands up who know people in San Francisco next time I come in, not 4. You get it? Good, I'm finished.